Is there some kind of, I don't know, podcast that people could listen to understand this better?
And this is not a shameless plug on our part.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt,
about a year ago, I launched a new podcast, which it's new for me. It's called Victory Over Communism with Bill Gertz. And I try to do 1 or 2 episodes each month. It's a freelance project. It's not related to the Washington Times, but it basically looks at 2 things. One, I address Marxism, Leninism with Chinese characteristics for the new era, which is the latest iteration under Xi Jinping of Chinese communism. And I look at what the ideology is, why it's incorrect and wrong. And then I offer a counter proposal, which is based in part on Judeo-Christian principles. I then do a news segment of the podcast, and then I end up with a short interview section. And I've interviewed some amazing people, including Miles Yu, the former State Department China policymaker, who I mentioned earlier, and former Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs, David Stilwell. And so I think it's an important tool, especially for young people. I think that it's hard to talk about ideology like that, but again, it's helpful that I always mention that I said, this is not about people, this is about ideology. In America, people are free to believe in whatever they want, but the point of the podcast is to try to help people to better understand what we're up against and what we're facing in these destructive ideologies.
I'm curious, why do you feel like the Judeo-Christian part is so important in countering communist ideology?
Well, if you look at communists and Marxists, the overriding feature of it is atheism. And if you take God out of the equation, then any crime against humanity can be justified. And I think that that's largely the reason why communism has been so destructive and caused so many such death and imposed such tyranny.
And do you think that the issue, like you talked about Marxist communist ideology in America and the Chinese Communist Party, are those issues that are like on 2 separate tracks? Are they tied together? Can you defeat one without defeating the other?
Yeah, I think that they're definitely separate. Yeah, the Chinese threat is much larger. The American Marxist issue is really kind of a combination of people who believe in Marxism and other radicals who are more or less, you could almost say, anarchist, or there's a whole school of thought that looks at anti-religion and the United States as the source of all the world's evils. And I think so. Those are 2 kind of separate things, and they align on some issues, but for the most part, the real giant gorilla is the Chinese Communist Party, and efforts must be taken to counteract that and ultimately replace it. I think calling for regime change, we don't need to call for regime change, but we could call for party change. And I think that when people understand what's happening in China, Xi Jinping is revitalizing Marxism, Leninism. The government is really is more or less a figurehead now. Even when they send officials to meet with Western officials, they don't send government officials; they send Communist Party officials. So I think if we understand that, I think that could be a first step in trying to counter the Chinese Communist Party.
Do you think it's still possible to do that? It's not too late?
It's getting late, but it's not too late.
A slight bit of optimism. I think that's pretty much par for this podcast. It's not absolute despair, but pretty close.
A little bit of despair.
Pretty
only.
close.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you for joining us. We'll put a link to your podcast below. Also, I recommend to anyone watching to check out your new book, Deceiving the Sky, Inside Communist China's Drive for Global Supremacy.
Yeah, and if people want information, I have a website. It's called The Gertz File. It's at gertzfile.com. And on Twitter, I'm at Bill Gertz, and other Truth Social and other social platforms.
Is your tagline, The Truth Gertz?
No, it's get the inside story.
It's not quite as good as mine, but you do you. Everybody Gertz. Thanks for joining us. This was a lot of fun having you on.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Something that kind of got me thinking, when we were talking about, McCarthyism, and it got me wondering if, it's really a good idea when I call communists, what's that word, Shelley, I use?
Oh, come on. As soon as you said McCarthyism, I knew what you were trying to do.
I was looking over and I saw Shelley's face.
Just doing the Jim stare to the camera.
It was, I knew Shelley knew.
I thought I had you that time.
No, Chris, no.
It's really hard to trick Shelley.
Yeah, to say.
What we need is some sort of ideology of deception.
Yeah, maybe you could go ask Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping, I really want Shelley to say dirty reds. If you get her to do that, I will do anything.
I will help you invade Taiwan.
This is the only thing in life I want anymore.
I think that's actually the first time you've actually said the thing that you want me to say, because I think a lot of times people have been confused about what it is.
Have I not been saying dirty reds enough? I'm sorry, Shelley. I will say dirty reds a lot more. I'm sorry this has upset you.
No, not upset me.
So why don't you want to say dirty reds, Shelley?
Do you really want me to seriously explain it?
I do want you to explain it.
I think I've explained it before. It's because it plays into the McCarthyism thing. Because it's too easy once you start calling names for, when people start calling all of their enemies Nazis, that word ceases to have any meaning. And then, it becomes about calling people names and not about actually exposing what the dangers of that ideology is.
That's a very intelligent, thoughtful answer.
Are you defending Nazis, Shelley?
That's
what I'm hearing.
That's what we would get if we literally muted out everything Shelley had just said.
Which is basically how a lot of news media report things. Shelley Jung says, quote,
something Nazi.
Yeah.
It's like that Jordan Peterson interview where that woman just kept saying, so you're saying that, and something completely different than the last sentence.
He's like, no, that's not what I said.
So you're saying you want to round up women and put them into concentration camps? No, how did you get that?
All right, whatever.
Anyway, but
I've explained myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to kind of go over this once every several months. Because it's been a long campaign to get you to say dirty reds, and you have so far refused to say it. You've even refused to say it completely by accident.
You've even tried to get me to say the words separately so that you can somehow splice them together.
The never-ending quest to take you completely out of context.
Somebody who watches this show who's on Reddit, go through everything Shelley has ever said and find the words dirty and red and splice
it has to
together.
Be reds, though, which is not a common phrase. Yeah. Yeah, well, in a few years, AI technology will be good enough that we could just
deep fake it?
Deep fake the whole thing.
Well, there's something to be optimistic about.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we ended this podcast with this very enlightening and serious discussion about this topic.
Do you have something intelligent you want to add?
If I did, I don't remember it anymore.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things that's happened is the spy balloon story. And I know we've talked about this because even though, as a form of spying, that spy balloon collected far less information than TikTok or the CCP's hacks of any of these institutions like OPM, or their general internet surveillance, or really almost any of their other spying things. And yet the spy balloon is so visible and so obviously a violation that it's brought people from different parts of the political aisle together to be there's something we have to wake up about.
Yeah, even in some ways, I think it was more visceral than COVID. I think with COVID, just because of all the insanity.
What's the origin of COVID?
Who knows? Nobody.
But the spy balloon couldn't have accidentally come from a wet market.
It was a pangolin that launched the spy balloon.
Oh no.
A pangolin and a bat.
Somewhere in the world, there's this one super evil pangolin that's responsible for everything.
I mean, really, the CCP should have just said that. It was a pangolin, and if you say otherwise, you're racist.
And then the New York Times would have been frantically writing, it was a pangolin balloon. If you're racist, if you say
Anonymous sources say it was a...
Well, I mean, I think also COVID, there was just too much stuff attached to COVID. Like, it wasn't a simple story.
Yeah,
right?
plus like the day-to-day fear of like, oh, can I breathe in public?
Yeah, or, am I going to... I think we forget also now, 3 years on, how scary it was in the first few months.
Yeah, people disinfecting their like grocery shopping
or
bags,
just like
packages.
not knowing like how people were getting it or how people could get it. And I mean, we were in New York City. There were refrigerator trucks of bodies outside the hospitals. Like the first wave was very scary to people, and I think that just drives out like the whole like where did it come from and stuff from people's minds.
Where is it coming?
Where did it come from? Where'd you go?
Yeah.
Where did you come from? COVID. Oh no.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good point, Shelley. I'm glad you make good points that aren't undermined by something incredibly stupid. Either Matt or I say.
But okay, Matt's point about the spy balloon being a good, that was a good point.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what would the show be without me and Chris, especially me, making stupid comments? The answer is nothing. So let's leave it at that.
Possibly a more watched podcast.
But
we wouldn't want that.
But if you're still watching and you've made it this far, it's because you like the way we go off the rails.
So yeah,
Train
thank you.
wreck every time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Can we end it now?
Why? Do you have somewhere to go? Do you have laundry to do? Maybe you got a whole basket full of dirty reds.